In my travels, I get to meet some cool people. Jason and Michael from Scaled are two of such people. We had a really great conversation all about managing remote workforce, and it's a thing that many MSPs deal with and or will deal with in the future. So let's jump into our conversation. Well, good morning, or I guess sort of afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. I am really happy that we are getting our webinars back in order. It's been a little while since we've done one of these things, and I'm really excited to have Michael and Jason from Scaled here talking about managing remote workforce, things. Because obviously, as MSPs, we spend a lot of time managing remote people, and or with the pandemic, we kind of had to get good at it. Well, for those of you who are looking for some help to learn how to do those, or, do this better and kind of level up your abilities for managing remote people, today is really a conversation for you. I'm going to now hand over the microphone to Jason and Michael, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reiterating what Adam said, that we absolutely want this to be a conversation, a lesson that I learned a long time ago in presentations. And by the way, this is also in presenting my ITSP to prospects, not just what I'm doing in Scaled, was to not have a questions slide at the end. That meant I was talking at you and you had to hold on to your thoughts to the very end. And most of the time we didn't get to them. So adjusting to interactive has always been much, much better. And that's absolutely what we want here. So make it conversational. Feel free to interrupt. We would love to make sure that you're getting value out of this. So that, real quick background on Scaled. So Scaled is a staff augmentation firm focused specifically on MSPs. We have focused in this area for a few reasons, our background, and let Michael introduce himself, but my name is Jason Knight. I'm one of the founders. My background is in ITSP and MSP in that world, and I've founded, grew, and sold a number of IT companies. My largest was back a while back in 2014, 2015, and we were at 50 million in total revenue. So we sold it to Rollup and operated in that Rollup for a while, and then retired out of that and started coaching MSPs. And through that experience, I got to know Michael, and he and I were working together and started to recognize one of the biggest hindrances in growing MSPs was access to great talent. And so we founded Scaled as a way to provide that strong L2, L3, what we call L4 talent to MSPs, and do it in a way that we think is fairly unique. And we'll talk about that towards the end. So Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Michael, I started my MSP in California 21 years ago, TLC Tech. Still own that, although I've retired out of it completely. We started using techs remotely from South Africa about 6 years ago, which is how we kind of came into this. And like Jason said, we had worked together in that capacity in my MSP, and then we saw the need for this and started Scaled 3 years ago.
So today, again, just to reiterate, it's conversational. We certainly can give you a presentation and talk at you the whole time, but I know that today's world is different than when we started, and that early on, there was a bit of evangelism that we had to go through to get people convinced that remote resources were a valuable and viable direction to go with your company. And today, I'm sure all of you have remote resources or have considered or have had them in the past. So today is really about doing it well, not just why you need it. Although if you need convincing, let us know. I would love to have that conversation. But today is really about how to do it well. And some background too on this. Not only do we provide technical resources to MSPs, but we have both served in a coaching capacity to MSPs. So we've seen it on both sides and understand where some of the gotchas are. And I will tell you, we work with about 100 MSPs in this space. And so we've also been able to see what works and what doesn't. There are definitely some patterns for those who don't succeed in managing remote resources correctly. And we'll touch on that today. So we're going to talk about onboarding. We're definitely going to get into ideas on management and time tracking, all that stuff. So we'll dig into it. All right, so to start with, we always say show, shadow, support. It is one of the things we see that's actually fairly common, and it's unfortunate that MSPs are extremely busy organizations. We were touching on that before the webinar started. The MSP business is tough. It absolutely is. It is. There's always fires burning. There are always things going on. So onboarding a new employee can be tough because it does require time and intentionality. And sometimes you don't have that time and intentionality or time to be intentional, and it will lead to a failure and cost you more time and money in the end. So when we see a failed onboarding, it is often because they've thrown them to the wolves and said, "Hey, go close tickets." They've put them in the pod or they've put them into the tech team, and they have not given real direction. Even in someone that comes in that's qualified, that may have worked with an MSP before, still needs a proper onboarding. So we have a 30, 60, 90-day program that we really insist on to make sure that there is a highest degree of success towards the end of this. And success isn't just that they're integrated, but that they're fully productive and they're positively influencing your team. So show first and foremost, make sure that you walk them through your culture, introduce them to who you are, how we operate, what our expectations are. It sounds elementary, but many companies don't do that. They don't really do a proper committed onboarding. And I really encourage you to spend hours, not minutes, with the folks coming on board to make sure that they really understand who we are, how we operate, our expectations, and that will really pay dividends. If you don't catch them in that first day, the odds of them adopting the culture you want diminish rapidly, right? By day 2, 3, they're going to pick up bad habits from others and go down the wrong path. So right off the bat, make sure that you have proper cultural integration with your team. Absolutely training and pairing them up with the right people. This is something we also see that goes sideways often. The person with the most time to do the training and mentoring is oftentimes the one that you don't necessarily want to reproduce. It's the curse of the competent, right? So those that are most competent get the most work. Those that are the least confident get the least work and have the most time. Don't be tempted to assign them to those folks. Pair them up with those that are the rock stars that you want to make sure that you are replicating. Documentation is key. And again, we don't oftentimes have the luxury of documenting everything we do effectively. So use this as a chance to document it.
Yeah.
So as you're onboarding them, you're training them on workflows and you're teaching them on what to do, and use it as an opportunity to identify gaps. You know what, I can't train you on this because we don't have training on it, right? So let's build that right now. So through that process, it can be an opportunity to improve who you are. And then, by the way, this is not unique to remote workers, but it is even more important with remote workers because they are disconnected from the rest of your team physically, and they're not going to be able to see the behaviors going on around them. So absolutely, right off the bat, show shadowing, as I mentioned, pairing them up with the right mentor. And it is so critical that they are participating. Your rock stars are participating and replicating rock stars, right? That's absolutely key. So how do we talk? How do we document? How do we do tickets? So side by side, let them observe it. So don't expect a remote worker or any worker for that matter to be productive day one. The reality is if you have that expectation, I would say even in week 1, week 2, if you're expecting them to be productive, you're missing a step. You really are going to end up with a lot of gaps. So we're suggesting connect them, be patient, take time to make sure that you onboard them properly. And then that support side, making sure that that you are checking in periodically. The 30, 60, 90-day plan is something that you are actually living out and following. We always say by day 80, we really need a go, no-go decision. So don't wait till day 90 and then say, hey, I wonder how that went, right? We should know by then. By day 80, the go, no-go is a conversation we need to have with them. They should know that they're under probation, and that is something we're going to evaluate at that stage. And if you are passing it, then we're going to continue forward with you. Well, I've got clients that will literally have a different designation for those on probation. And until you have passed through that gate, that 90-day gate, you're not fully a team member yet. And so I know that sounds like a long time, but those that have those kind of plans succeed exponentially more than those who don't.
And I want to touch more on that documentation. In a former life, I was a school teacher, and I can't tell you how much creating documentation, when people create the documents, they have to learn it, document it. They're gonna incorporate that knowledge so much more. And one of the things that I hear from potential new clients is they worry they don't have enough documentation, that they need to get all these things created first. This is a really opportune time to get more documentation done, and for your new employees to learn a lot more by doing it.
Exactly.
So I have a question real quick before we go on to the next slide. Tell me a little bit about what you would put in your 30, 60, 90-day success plan, because there's like a million things I can think of that would go in there. Like what are some of the things that you would recommend to be in there?
Well, we have a template that we use, but we always recommend that it be developed specific to your environment. So obviously there's going to be training right off the bat on ConnectWise. They may come from a ConnectWise shop, but the way you implement ConnectWise or Autotask or Halo is going to be different than your peers. The way we do ticketing, the way we engage our clients, so that the workflows and processes that we follow are absolutely a big part of that 30, 60, 90-day program. Again, the documentation side of it, starting to do tickets and having some QC with that. So that mentor is someone that's reviewing the work that's being done and giving guidance, listening to the conversations that are had with the clients, just making sure that we're stepping through, so that 30, 60, 90-day plan is just progressively getting you more and more responsibility within the organization, and higher level of expectation of how you're going to perform through that. So that's certainly something we can share with this group. If you want, we can share our plan.
And it also gets the tech that you're hiring really well aligned with, hey, this is what you need to do on by day 30, day 60, day 90 to be successful at our company. So it gets everybody aligned out of the gate. And there's some simple things in there, learning the different tools, learning the company values. These are the things that happen in week 1 and week 2, getting in the documentation, ticket life cycle, these kind of things. But it just lays out real clearly for them what they need to be thinking about and what they need to learn.
Absolutely.
Something we're going to talk about ticket dispatch here in a bit, and that is a big area that is often a gap in understanding with new techs. Like, do I go get tickets? When do I get tickets? What kind of tickets? What do I do with these? How do I escalate? All these things are things that we just take for granted, right? Because the rest of our team knows how to do it. Someone brand new coming in is not going to know that. And the 30, 60, 90 isn't just a way to indoctrinate them into who we are, but it's also a way for us to filter out where they came from. So the reality is they may bring bad habits with them from the previous organization or their background that we don't want in our organization. So we're going to be monitoring and observing as we go. Doesn't mean they're not a good tech, but it may mean that, hey, that's a habit I need you to break, because we don't do that here. This is the way we operate.
Yeah, I love the plan. And real quick, the 90-day thing is important for everybody to think about too, because so many of you, because I've talked to I think everybody on this call at least once before, is the hire slow, fire fast thing, right? If they're not working out at day 80, as Jason said, they're probably not working out on day 90, and it might be time to cut them early. The other piece is, and speaking from my own experience at my former MSP, we always had a 90-day out because we outsourced we didn't outsource to Scale, because Scale I don't think it existed yet, but we outsourced to a different company, and we had 90 days. If at day 91 we were locked in for the two-year contract with that person, and we could get out of it, but we of course had to pay a bunch to get out of it. So it's really important that if you're going to outsource and use a service like Scaled, like any of the other ones in the industry, that you understand what your kind of that that probationary period is and how that works for you, because you don't want to show up on day 91 and go, oh crap.
Well, and to that end, we don't have that. We do have a probationary period that gives you a little more flexibility, but we definitely don't have that kind of a long-term contract lock-in. But the reality is the cost of keeping a bad team member or the not the right team member is so high that you don't want to drag out that situation. So that day 80 or day 90 go no go conversation. The reason we say day 80 is it gives you some time to do something about it at that point, to make adjustments or terminate if you want to do it at that point. And I'll tell you, within my own company, we called it was a go no go meeting. They knew going into it that there is a meeting on the schedule that they're going to tell me if I get to continue forward and keep my job. So it wasn't this nebulous thing. It was clear, and it was celebrated, right? When they passed it, we announced it, and it was a big deal, right? Hey, Bob is now officially on the team, and we love, everything he's doing. So I would highly encourage that. And if you want some thoughts or guidance on it, please reach out. We're happy to help you out there.
Very good. And just a real quick time check. We're just a little bit over quarter past the hour.
Okay.
Awesome.
Very good. All right. So things to consider. If you've worked with remote resources, you know that American English is different than English around the world, and the way they spell things, the way they speak, the way that the idiomatic expressions are different from one culture to the next. Spend time helping them understand language a bit. It's not offensive to call it out and say, I'm not sure I understand the way you use that, or I'm not sure you're clear on how we're using this, and just spend time with them, right? But have fun with it. It's something to celebrate. Some of those cultural differences don't have to be a negative. It can absolutely be a positive to your business, and that's something we leverage all the time. We have fun with it. We have fun with the founders is what we call it, where our team will actually try to stump us with words and terms they use and let us guess what they mean, that kind of thing. But definitely invest in your culture, but don't be afraid to give them feedback on the language. It is something that should be expected.
And that is often challenging for Americans to do. They think it's kind of rude to correct. The other thing that I would suggest is, especially on some of the different areas that you can hire from, idiomatic expressions, you knock that one out of the ballpark, are often not going to be understood. It kind of depends upon the cultural alignment with the country where they come from. Take them aside and ask them, how do you want to be corrected? Do you want do you want it live? Do you want to just come to me afterwards? But have that discussion with them so they make sure that it's really easy to say, hey, I didn't get that, or with your staff, making sure that if they're using these kind of expressions, to say, hey, did you grab that? Did you understand that?
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Yeah, the other two are pretty obvious, right? The infrastructure and security. We highly recommend that you use a VDI environment. We provide equipment to our team members that would be placed at MSPs, but even with that, we recommend whenever you can, keep the data local in the U.S. It'll also help you with some compliance questions. It is something that we recommend that you not take lightly, the security of that local device and that interaction. So it is, and by the way, that's not unique to any specific country. For that matter, if they were in Kansas City, I would suggest the same thing, right? So let's make sure that we are properly securing that environment. Putting on monitoring tools if you've got them is not a bad idea. The soft phone video side of it oftentimes does need to be a locally installed app, and we can talk more about that. But there are absolutely ways to get great performance and manage them even from South Africa. We had a team member that was in the bottom of South Africa, and they were assigned to a company that was in the top part of Canada, up in the frozen tundra. It couldn't have been more far apart, and it worked great. So we know the distance is not a barrier. And then the last piece, I'd love to open this up to some feedback from you all on what you're seeing as challenges, but domestic versus remote or offshore, the differences are really very little, right? We don't recommend that you treat them differently. Include them in your conversations, your huddles, pull them into meetings. Absolutely treat them like you would a local resource, with one exception, and that is the on-call rotation. So not that you can't include them in on-call rotation, just keep in mind the time zone differences is something that a lot of people don't think twice about. But your local team, when they're on call, you get an after hours call that's probably going to interrupt their dinner. If you've got someone that's in South Africa or the Philippines or somewhere else, that late afternoon, early evening call that they might get is probably going to wake them up at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. It can be very, very disruptive to be on call. Again, not that you can't do it, but be thoughtful about how you apply those on-call hours. So that's one big difference. So let me open this up to the team. Is anybody handling or dealing with on-call in a different way, or how do you manage your remote resources? Do they participate in your on-call rotations?
Maybe. Well, you got me sitting here stuck thinking about it now. I got a little bit harder than I probably should have the first time. We've got a Philippines remote employee. He's real great. I love you talked about really making them inclusive and part of the team and the culture. In fact, he's actually one of our strongest techs right now when it comes to customer service and technical skills. But anyways, moving on here, in terms of the on-call rotation, we have him in our on-call rotation. I don't think he's gotten many calls in the last 7 or 8 months since we've instilled it, but it's something I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on for sure now.
It's at least a consideration, and the point you opened up with is what we see all the time. I hadn't really thought about it, and I don't blame you for that, right? I totally get it, but if you really will look at when the typical calls come in and when they would land with them, it'll open your eyes up a little bit to say, hey, just from a common courtesy, I think let's find a way to be creative around that. So I'm sorry, was that Hunter or Josh? I both were lighting up there.
That was Hunter. Sorry, Josh. He was the raised his hand appropriately. I did not.
No problem.
No worries. I've been stepped on people's toes many of times, so it's all good. So we have a couple. Ours is kind of interesting, and I would like to almost pose a question, I guess. So we were pretty much all local technicians. We had some people kind of gradually over years, and this is even before COVID, move off and become remote users. We have a couple that have stayed on the on-call, but of course, and that brings a little animosity to the local people, because if something happens, they're on call, and it needs to be on site. It's somebody that wasn't on call that's now getting a call to go. We try to preach that the MSP, that's the nature of the business. Everybody's on call. We're all have to step up and step in, and if we all work together, it doesn't seem to be as big a burden on everyone, as long as you kind of share the load.
Yeah. And one of the things, if you look at the time where they're located, just being creative. So one of the things that we suggest, because the time difference is 6 to 9 hours, is have the US based be on call, maybe till that midnight. Well, that's once you get to midnight, it's daylight hours in South Africa. So having kind of one way to do that to get everybody involved and still be fair to remote employees is having kind of a split that way, so that your Americans know they're not going to get woken up now. The local place. So that's a way. Yeah, that's a way that you can do that to kind of offset that because you're one of the things we talk about, you never want to create an us versus them with your remote staff.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we do have some that do on-call stipends and those kind of things, but it's there's a point where it can just wear them out. So that split on-call is definitely a creative way we've seen people tackle that and have that work actually well. In fact, we've seen it also work where we'll have the team start earlier or later, and it can forget on call for a minute, but give yourself some expanded support hours as well, as a result of thinking about the time zones as an advantage, not as a disadvantage.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that, because that was the thing that we did. We had a resource in India, and we actually had him work an offset shift a little bit. So he would start a little bit later than we would typically have somebody work, and he would work later, so that way he would do patching and some of the other stuff that needed to get done after hours, and it actually worked better for his schedule. And our on-call people didn't have to worry about like the evening side of on-call. It was the early morning stuff that they had to deal with, but that almost never happened anyway because of our clients we had. But that worked out great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In my MSP, we actually had one of our techs from South Africa start at 3 a.m. Pacific. Yeah. They do the backups, they do the reboots, they do all of the things that needed to be done after hours or early morning. And then they were available for after hours emergency calls starting at 5, 6 a.m. And then they were also available for that morning rush when the tickets first came in.
Exactly. Good. In fact,
can I ask you guys to pause just for a second on the language and culture? Mostly because I think it's important, and I want to call this out because I've seen this happen with a couple different areas. I don't know anything about the South African culture, but I can tell you for sure from my experience that both members from India and the Philippines have a different culture and different expectations around authority and communicating with them, right? So, for example, I had a couple of folks in India that we had to be very direct. We had to say, this is exactly how you get work. You do this every single time, and they kind of waited for us to tell them what to do. Where if I were to have the same conversation with a person in the Philippines that was very direct, they would feel a little bit attacked. So I think it's important for no matter where you have remote resources. Obviously, if they're in the U.S., it's maybe a little bit different. But if you have remote resources in other nations, it's in your best interest to understand their culture a little bit better as well, including things like holidays and those kind of things, which might be which are obviously different than ours.
We'll touch on that. In fact, Michael, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, it speaks to this.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Quite a bit. No, you're good. You're good. Keeping us moving. So you're 100% right. One of the reasons that we chose South Africa as our primary place to bring techs in from is that it is English as a first language in most cases. There are a lot of similarities to the American culture, but it is not the U.S. It is different in not just the expressions and languages, but also as you said, the way they operate. And so we see this a lot in India and Philippines, where, as you said, they're culturally going to follow directions more than they're going to be innovative and take initiative in certain situations. It's not that they can't. It just is typically it's not an expectation or trained. In South Africa, we have a little bit different situation. They're a little more entrepreneurial and have a stronger tendency to be innovative and to initiate new ideas. But I will say that even that is still there is a culture of following the reporting structure. So they are going to be reluctant to skip a management level to go have a conversation with the owner, for instance, if there's a problem. All right, and so that's not a bad thing, but you're going to have to reach out to them and pull information from them sometimes. So the one-on-ones is really important with remote workers, even more so than it is the U.S. workers. So we talk a lot about us versus them, incorporating them into conversations. Again, celebrating the differences is something that we highly encourage. But definitely finding a culture and finding team members that fit your environment, your sense of humor, the way that you communicate can be a challenge, but it is absolutely possible. And so part of it is where they come from, but part of it also is going to be training and just engaging them to make sure that they're really clear on what our expectations are. Now, we've got this in here that this can't just be on management. This has to be your whole team. So if you as the CEO are having these conversations with them, that isn't going to get it done. You really need to make sure that the whole team is involved and engaging the remote workers into your environment. You will absolutely have a us versus them if you're the only one that feels responsible for doing that. Now, if you bake it into your culture that everybody fully embraces the full team, you're going to see a big shift with remote workers really being productive and engaged with what's going on. So birthdays, holidays, one thing that Scale does, we handle all the back end logistics for our clients. So if you want to celebrate a birthday, or you want to give them a bonus, or you want to deliver food or whatever, our team takes that on and supports you in that. It's a big part of helping them out. But also want to say that there's a word of caution there. If you were to send swag, for instance, from the U.S. to them, they're going to get whacked with a huge import fee and VAT cost and all kinds of things. We had a client that sent a bunch of shirts and stuff to a team member without telling us about it, and it showed up, and it cost them about $400 US to get it out of customs. Like I could have bought them a wardrobe for the next 3 years for the price that it cost them to get it out of customs. So in that case, we always say, come to us. We'll get it printed locally. We'll handle all that for you. Don't worry about it. But just do be careful when you send something overseas. It's not like sending it to another state. It really there can be some significant costs there. So be careful with that. Yeah. What challenges have you all faced though in incorporating team members into your culture, or with culture clashes between two different techs or different markets? Have you seen success, Hunter? Go ahead.
I think the biggest thing for us is actually this us versus them, and we haven't necessarily had an issue where the guys locally feel any animosity towards them, but I have noticed, I think that there's some sentiment that maybe some of their responsibilities that they're taking care of, that the remote guy cannot, kind of plays to that bad taste in their mouth. And I do my best at trying to break it up. We've got our offshore employee doing most of our monthly security audits that we do for the clients. He's doing all of the maintenance for servers and network equipment. And maybe it's just, I'm talking this out loud and coming to my own conclusion here, I think, but maybe it's just helping the local guys understand that, hey, you guys don't, or, the remote guys don't have to do PC setups, right? But they're doing X, Y, and Z that you guys don't even see. So trying to maybe make that a little bit more transparent for both sides, I think could probably help that as well. But open to your guys' thoughts.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I would suggest in that situation, because we do see that a lot, is sounds silly, but make sure they have different titles. They actually have different positions and different roles and different expectations. So he's a NOC tech, or you're an L3 reactive engineer, or whatever it is, right? So that there's not an expectation that, hey, we have the same job, yet he doesn't have to do this piece, but I do. Take that away completely. So get clear roles defined, and it does make it a lot easier to say, well, no, he doesn't do PC setups because he's a NOC engineer, and you're not, right? So it is start that conversation first off, right off the bat, where you set those expectations, and then I think getting to them to collaborate too, though, is helpful. So we do push for engagement between the techs as much as we can to make sure that they're chatting with each other, they're communicating on issues and helping to troubleshoot issues. We actually have, it's not uncommon for now a lot of our remote guys to be playing video games with the other techs after hours, and they get to where they build a bond, and it's not just, hey, he's a resource that is helping our company out, but he is a part of my team, and he's my fellow peer, and we should be finding a way to better engage with them. So part of the Hunter is on you as a leader to make sure that we break down those barriers and eliminate those excuses. And then part of it's on them to say, listen, it is, he is part of our team. You need to make sure that we're fully embracing.
The other thing I'd like to add here on it, just not being on management, as you're doing the interview process, we have a lot of our clients that will actually bring in people from their tech team to do the second technical interview. It's a really good way to help get buy-in. Just two caveats on that. Vet their questions. I've often seen people love to show how smart they are and ask this really obscure question that they had to do yesterday. that can kind of throw off the pace of the interview.
Yeah.
Also, just back to the previous lifetime as a teacher, there's two different types of learner, or there's two types of people, visual and audio. If you're a visual learner and somebody asks you a technical question, literally they have to get it in their head, kind of translate it on the fly so they can see it in their head to answer it. So it's really, really helpful to have your questions on a slide deck and then just kind of pop through the slide deck. It makes it really easy for those of us that are visual versus audio learners.
It allows you to vet them a little bit ahead of time too, to make sure it's not a stump the tech question, but it's genuinely useful. And we could talk a little more about how we vet folks and some thoughts there for sure. Well, let's go to the next slide if you would.
Go ahead, Adam.
I would say real quick time check. We are 37 after the hour, so we're doing fine time wise. I will say to your point from before, and what kind of what Hunter was mentioning is that one of our remote engineers took over all of the QuickBooks desktop upgrades, because this is now a few years ago, and boy did the rest of my team go, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to ever do that again.
Yeah.
And so we just gave them all the line of business app updates. And that completely mitigated this guy doesn't have to go on site. They were like, nope, this guy has to deal with all of that. And everybody was happy about it. So it worked out pretty good.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So looking for ways to do that as well can be very helpful for your team and to get that cultural alignment between the on-prem and the remote.
Definitely. All right. So, really, we've touched on a lot of these. Making sure that you are communicating regularly. I would highly not just encourage, but almost insist that every time you talk to them, be on video. This is something we see, especially with text. We're all busy. We don't love being on video. But man, when you're communicating with somebody and you're trying to make a connection and relationship, always on video, and make it a cultural expectation and to your team, not just you. When you're on the huddle, everybody's on. And by the way, that's a super expensive meeting. I always really insist on that. Like this is a super expensive 15 minutes. You will be on your video. You will be off it everything else, and you're going to be fully engaged in what we're doing because I need value out of it. And that is something that needs to permeate your tech team, that we engage, we communicate well. And we're defining expectations of communication. It's not just leaving it up to them to figure out. Making sure that you're pulling feedback from them. If you're expecting remote workers, or any worker for that matter, but especially remote workers, to speak up and tell you what's going on, or if they're doing well or not doing well, you're really setting yourself up for failure. Right? You need to be sitting down with them and saying, I want to hear from you what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. I want to hear from you where we can help you and give it feedback both directions. That is one of the biggest things we hear from our remote work team, is that they have no idea how they're doing. They don't get feedback. And I will talk to the client, and they're like, I would have told him if he was not doing a great job, right? So the fact that I didn't say anything means he's doing well. Well, to a lot of remote workers, that means nothing. So do not use silence as a positive feedback. You have got to tell them that I like this, I don't like that. And if it's there's nothing wrong with giving them negative feedback. They want to know what they're doing wrong. And again, we hear this a lot. So take it as not just an anecdote, but it is something that you can just assume as a rule. You've got to give them feedback. We do see differences in companies, one company to the next, in terms of how they handle and distribute tickets, the way they triage. That dispatch piece from one MSP to another can vary, but I will tell you that those that we find that are most successful, that are happiest with their team members, tend to be a push environment, meaning that we're assigning tickets from dispatch that are pre-triaged if you can. If not, that's okay, but assigning it to the tech. As soon as they're done, we have an expectation they let us know they're complete, or someone's watching the board to give them another ticket. If you're waiting on them to pull tickets, we just find that the pace is always slower. There tends to be bigger gaps between tickets, and there's a lot of variability from one tech to another. One might have tons of initiative and be a go-getter. Another might just operate at their own pace. And so if you can control that pace, you're going to see
Mhm.
more consistent success. So definitely consider that for sure.
Can I add a comment here? Because we
Yeah.
ran into this in a big way. That was one of the things we struggled the most with, because we were very much a pull environment for quite a long time. And one, I would never have gone back to it, by the way. But we were pull for a very long time, and we had a couple of resources in India. One did pretty okay with the pulling, and one was abysmal at it. Like it just we couldn't get it past their psyche to like go pull this new ticket. And so we ended up having to kind of adjust our process for that. Ultimately, we got rid of the pull because for all kinds of reasons, and I can get into that in a different day. But highly recommend push, especially if you're hiring somebody, even if in the US, and they're going to be remote and they're not going to be in your office, and you can't just walk down and say, hey, remember, go pick up this ticket. I would strongly recommend doing a push, even if you're hiring somebody, in the US to be remote.
And you may say it works great for us, but you may have gotten lucky and you happen to have a bunch of techs that have that initiative and are good at a pull environment. That is not the case. If you want consistency and your ticket pace, push is absolutely the way to go. So the last couple of points on this, the role expectations. We always say don't look for a unicorn, but by the way, that is true in every role in your organization. Hunter, sorry, I missed your hand. I'll come back to you in just a second. But never define a role that requires a unicorn. In other words, I want an L3 that will also do L1 tickets anytime. It can also act as a part-time account manager. And if you can help us with QuickBooks, that would be awesome, right? That's the guy I want. And please do yourself a favor and don't create roles that require a unicorn. It needs to be something that is repeatable, that you can rehire for that role over and over and over again and succeed. So we push on that hard. The last quick thing on that is hire for your needs, not just your aspirations. And we often will see this from companies that are smaller. Hey, we have 8 people in the company, but we need an L4 network engineer is what we'd like to have on board. Like, I know you want that, but do you really know how to use them consistently day in, day out, 40 hours a week? What do we really need in this environment? And so adjusting our needs and expectations to match is something that we work on pretty hard. But Hunter, I apologize. I skipped your hand there. What did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just in regards to the push versus pull. I figured it probably could open up to a longer conversation we don't have to get into, but I was just wondering if Adam, maybe you had any other ideas in how to manage in a pool environment when you were experiencing some of those struggles. Right now, I'm heavily moving towards a push environment, but finding the resources and justifying the cost for a full-time dispatcher is, I think, where I'm running into my roadblock right now.
Well, ironically, Hunter, and Adam, I'd love to hear your take on that, but to have a really effective pull environment, you've got to still have some level of triage or someone who's watching the board like a hawk. So it's not like you to be efficient in a pull environment doesn't mean that you have fewer resources. You still need someone that is monitoring that.
And I know a little bit about Hunter's company too, which helps me a little bit. But the short version of this, and what we ultimately ended up doing for our India folks until we switched over to a push environment, was we gave them a view, and we said if there are tickets in this view, and it was very specific to them, and sort of the things that we knew they could work on. If there's a ticket in here, you work it top down, and we just said that's going to have to be good enough, and that worked okay. Like it wasn't great, but it worked okay. And when you're a smaller MSP, because Hunter's MSP is they're growing quickly, but they're still on the little bit on the smaller side. Somebody needs to Jason's point, someone needs to be kind of triaging the tickets to a degree anyway. And that usually kind of falls on the service manager, which is kind of what I think is probably happening here. And so in your case, or in the case of I don't have a full-time dispatcher, I'm the service manager, kind of have to do a lot of the dispatching anyway. I might like set those people up for success a little bit differently and just say, hey, you know what? I need you to work on these 2 or 3 tickets. And then when these 2 or 3 things are done, check this view. And like always have a way for them to understand where they get their next work from that's very clear and very consistent. That will work better over time than, do this now, do that now, do this now, do that. It's just like, here's the next 2 or 3 things you need to work on, and if everything is clear, come and see me, right? And grab me on Teams or Slack or whatever your instant messaging app of choice is. That seemed to work a little better for us once we kind of figured that out. It took a while and a lot of frustration and banging our head against the wall, but we got there eventually.
The other option, and I've seen some smaller companies do this in kind of that tweener phase, is to take one of the on-prem kind of L2 techs that can also help kind of do some of that triage and dispatching, kind of take some of the pressure off of that service manager, that they can really be looking at the QA side of it, kind of helping that person, the junior tech, kind of learning how to dispatch well. But that's also a kind of a tweener way of doing that between not having it and hiring that full-time dispatcher.
And if you're going to go down the route, make sure that you have really clearly defined SLAs and SOPs. So, for instance, if a new user onboard ticket comes in, man, that gets high priority. It follows a really consistent SOP, and the SLA is timer starts, right? So train the remote team on those expectations. That'll help that a lot as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks, fellas. I appreciate the insights. It is kind of on me right now, and the guys are pretty good about going in there and pulling most days, but when they get carried away, it's very easy for a ticket to go sitting in there for several hours. So
yeah, and somebody needs to be looking at that on a regular basis for sure.
And I agree, by the way, on rocket ship, that comment. I have seen where that has failed a little bit, right? Where it'll assign a ticket or a schedule, and they'll call the client. They couldn't get a hold of them, and then it kind of goes into limbo. And so, actually, when you see a lot of this fail, is without someone watching, is hey, I reach out to the client, and now we're on client waiting status, and a ticket just ages out and it gets missed. So anyway, we can dive in. That's a deep well, right, on ticket management, but the clear path to success that we've seen is that a push is usually going to be more intentional and have higher success. And speaking of which,
thanks for the tangent, guys.
No worries. In fact, our next slide actually touches on this a little more clearly, but it is something that we live every day as MSPs, making sure that we are consistent the way we do our tickets. So I would suggest that you use this as you bring in remote workers as a chance to really deep dive, evaluate your ticket process and ticket flow. Are we doing it the way we should do it, or are we just doing it the way we've always done it? And I will tell you that we all kind of grew up in the industry and we just took on practices that seemed to make sense. This may be an opportunity to step back and clearly look at the tools you've got and rethink the routing and workflows. I think we covered most of this. The one thing that I also want to make sure that we're really clear on is we often manage text to utilization. Yep. And so getting really, really clear on what utilization means to you is so important. From one company to the next, they'll say, well, I want them to be 80% billable. Okay, well, does billable also include meetings with the clients? Does it include internal meetings? Does it include pre-sales engineering? Like, what is in that? And it's not always clear. If you've got downtime, what do you do with it? And where does it go? How do you document it? So utilization is a great metric to track productivity, and we absolutely should be doing that. I'll tell you, my company, we just simply took, it was 75% utilization. So 1,500 hours billable per year is what your target was. And if you could exceed that, great. But that's what we managed against. And we had really clear expectations on how you documented that time and what counted against utilization and what didn't. So maybe open that up to this team. How do you know when your techs are being productive? How do you track productivity? That's a huge question, I know. But you want to have a great answer? Do you track utilization with your techs?
Just reporting through our PSA.
And is that just tickets, the time against tickets?
Primarily time against tickets. We've got some pretty green guys right now. So between our president and I, we've decided to also have them track some internal tasks just to get them in the habit of actually making sure they're tracking internal time, making sure that we can, account for all of the time they've spent, whether or not it's with a customer, but just seeing how much they're using. So we're doing that right now, and the numbers are definitely moving up towards where we want to see them. So I think it's more of a practice for us right now, an exercise, if you will.
I love it. No, and that's spot on. So, and again, this is a long topic for sure, but definitely every hour should be accounted for towards something, and make sure you don't have a generic junk drawer ticket agreement that you just dump all the leftover time into. Highly encourage daily disciplines so that at the end of every day, these 5 things will be true, right? Your day's not done until these things are done, one of which is time entry and documentation. So that's something that we can spend a lot of time on, but giving your techs that clear guidance on how we operate and what our expectations are is going to help you succeed a lot. So I know we're almost out of time here. So why don't we roll to the next slide here and just say, if we can help in any way with any of these topics, reach out. We're more than happy to help out through just what we've seen and recommendations, guidance. If we can help you with resources, we would love to do that. So I'll tell you that our 3 big bullet points on what we do. So Scale provides level 2, 3, and 4 vetted technicians to MSPs. And by vetted, we put them through, 8 hours or more of interviews and testing. We actually have proctored live demonstration of technical expertise. So they actually have to fix broken stuff in front of our proctors, and they get graded on that and timed. We go through a lot of that. We do background checks and everything else. So by the time we give them to you, they're pre-vetted, and we feel confident that they would be a great for an MSP. In fact, our final guidance is, would I hire them in my company? And if that's true, then I'll present them to you. So we do that, highly vetted. We make it simple. So we take on all the HR and the complexity of bringing on remote workers, and we make it easy for you to hire, and if necessary, easy to release. Now, we don't want that to be a flippant decision, but it is something that we want to make sure we take on that for you. So Adam had mentioned having these long contracts. We do not have that. We do have a 30-day out. If you decide that it's not a fit, you just give us notice. We'll have a 30-day termination period, and it's an easy process for sure. So that is our goal. We handle all the logistics. If you want swag printed and all the stuff we talked about, you just let us know. And we'll even help out with PIPs and HR management and those kind of things if needed. And lastly, we do it legally and with integrity. So there are companies out there that will, you can bring in remote workers from, but they are oftentimes contracting them themselves and contracting to you. So there is an employment classification issue. If you want to direct them and treat them like an employee, then they need to be an employee somewhere. And so we actually hire them with our company in South Africa. We pay the taxes, we pay for benefits and all the stuff that you would need to make them a full employee, but they get assigned, dedicated to you and your environment. So you can direct them as needed. So legally and with integrity, you can manage them. So vetted, simple, and legal and with integrity. So that's it.
I will say that when we obviously went with a different vendor, but we absolutely wanted a vendor that did what you guys do, right? We wanted someone to manage all of the stuff that we knew we weren't going to be good at it. Like knowing the local laws in India or the Philippines, it was not a thing that we were prepared to do. And so having the fees that are paid to someone like you, it takes off all of that load that anybody else that would have to deal with it. It's a pain in the rear enough to hire somebody in a different state in the U.S. and have to deal with that, and then you multiply that by several times to go to a different country. So if anybody on this call is looking at going to a different country, hiring from a different country for outsourcing, you want to hire someone like Scaled to take off that garbage that you're going to have to deal with, just because there's just so much red tape. So
absolutely. Yeah. And again, they're strong technically. Their English is a first language, and so communication is as easy as we can make it, for sure. But please do reach out if we can help in any way.
I will say that it was fun for us when we would have clients come to our office and they would ask to meet the person that we had in a different country, and that meant to us. He had an accent. He was the person that he was actually answer phones. His name was Raj. And when they would come looking for Raj, you'd be like, what? Actually, Raj is in India, but we really appreciate that you feel like he was integrated as part of the team. And so I think that's a good gauge of success. So, obviously, it's an anecdotal gauge, but still.
That's a key, is that make sure your clients know that they are one of our team members that just happens to be remote, if you even want to share that, and not a third party. It's not outsourced. It's not a help desk. It is us. And they just happen to be somewhere else. That's all. Well, Adam, thank you for pulling us together.
Thank you for your time, Jason and Michael. It was a really great conversation, really great questions from those who were in attendance of the webinar. Thanks for coming on this ramble with us, and we hope to see you on the next one.